Hey, Cool Gray. I'm here today with Mr. Cool Gray. Say hi, honey.
Hi, honey.
Mr. Cool Gray is my special guest today because he is the bread baker in the household. He bakes bread every single week, and so I'm just going to go ahead and call him an expert on that. Today we are going to make a loaf of bread. What kind of bread are we making?
Buttermilk Rye Bread.
Yum. So we're going to go ahead and talk about your ingredients momentarily, and then we are going to walk you through the process. For this bread recipe, we will need 1 1/3 cup of water, 2 tablespoons vegetable oil, 1 1/2 tablespoons vinegar. We're using apple cider vinegar here, 2 tablespoons of honey. We're going to need 2 types of flour, 2 1/3 cup of bread flour, and 1 cup of rye flour. We will also need 2 tablespoons of powdered buttermilk, 1/3 of a cup of dry potato flakes. We're going to need a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of caraway seed, and we're also going to need 2 teaspoons of yeast. You can use active dry yeast, but we are using instant yeast. There's a link in the description box to a video that tells you why. Check that one out after you've finished watching this video. What's the first step?
First step is we're putting liquid ingredients in the bowl of the mixer. This recipe originally was intended for a bread machine, which you can certainly use. And if you wanted to go old-fashioned, you could just mix it up by hand with a wooden spoon in a big bowl. But the stand mixer is my preferred method, and it's easy because it lets you see what's going on better than any other way, and it does all the kneading for you. So we start off with warm water, about 105 degrees. Too hot and you will damage the yeast. Too cold and the dough will take longer to rise. This is the vegetable oil. This is the honey. You always start bread recipes with the liquid ingredients first, just so they all get mixed together. And to make this rye bread a little sour, we're using a little cider vinegar. It's a sneaky way of not having to make sourdough. So we've got our liquid ingredients in the bowl of the mixer, and the next thing you do is you start adding flour. And we're going to talk about the correct way to measure flour for bread baking. There are people who will say that flour measurement ideally should be done with a digital scale and weigh your ingredients. And I had a professor in college who used to say that implies a level of precision that does not exist in the real world. Because when you learn to bake bread, you will find that flours vary in their moisture content. The atmosphere in your house can affect it, whether you've got a humid house or an air-conditioned house, or if it's warm out or it's cold out. And you end up adjusting one way or the other, whether you weigh your ingredients or just measure with a measuring cup. So the best way to measure flour for bread baking is to fluff up your flour a little bit so it's got some air in it and it's not all packed down. And then you're just going to spoon it into the measuring cup. Some people scoop, but that tends to pack it down as well, and you might have more flour than you want when you're done. So you're going to get the measuring cup over full, and then you're going to level it off with a knife, or I'm just using my spoon, but that's how you measure. It is important to be relatively accurate, at least with the measuring cup, even if you're not weighing your ingredients. Okay, so I've added 2 1/3 cups of bread flour, and now I'm going to add the cup of rye flour that makes this rye bread, and then the rest of the dry ingredients. So we've got potato flakes, Makes a nice soft bread, springy. And here's the buttermilk. And in some recipes you could use liquid buttermilk, but we're using dry buttermilk. Works very well. Salt and caraway seed, of course, unless you don't. Caraway seed is optional if you don't like seeds in your rye bread, but it does give a nice flavor. It's not just the seed texture. And then the last thing that goes in is the yeast.
Why did you do that?
You try to keep the yeast away from the salt until it starts mixing, because salt can actually kill some of the yeast.
Okay, so that's all the ingredients. What's the next step?
Now we put it on the mixer and we let the mixer do the work of kneading.
I need you, honey. So this is going to knead for about how long?
About 4 minutes. You start on slow speed until it starts to come together, and then you go up a notch to knead it. So if you're using a stand mixer, you're kneading on speed 2, but we're on speed 1 right now, just getting the dough to come together. And once we see it really coming together, then we pick up the speed, and we set our timer for 4 minutes.
You're using a dough hook attachment.
Yes, never the paddle attachment to the mixer, always the dough hook. And we're ready to go and start kneading now. So we've been kneading about a minute, and I can already see that this needs more flour. It's a little too sticky. So we're going to shut it off, and we're going to add a couple of spoonfuls of flour here. What we're looking for when this is running is the dough holding together and not sticking to the bowl. So we're at the 4-minute mark. The dough is looking good, and we're going to stop the machine. And we're going to take the dough out. And you should actually be able to take it out of the bucket here by hand without a lot of difficulty. So here we've got a nice ball of dough. In fact, I'm just going to drop it on the counter and roll it into a nice ball.
Is that important to the rise process?
Yes, you want to have a fairly uniform ball, and this also lets you see that it's not too sticky, because if it was sticking to the counter, you would need to probably add a little more flour, and you would do that by kneading it in. But this is perfect.
Now this whole dough could have been made with hand kneading, right? But it would have
Absolutely.
taken longer or just been more laborious.
Right. So the old-fashioned method would have been to mix the dough up in a bowl with a wooden spoon, and then on a floured counter to knead for probably 8 to 10 minutes to get this texture. And then it's the same process from here out. You put it in an oiled bowl and you cover it for
It
about
doesn't
an
have
hour.
to be a beautiful vintage footed bowl, but in this case it does happen to be.
My grandmother's bowl. You cover it with plastic wrap and you let it rise for about an hour,
Okay,
and it will more than double.
so we're looking for more than double when we come back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Okay, so our dough has been rising for an hour. It's at least doubled, and you can see the gas of the yeast has been working. We're going to deflate the dough, which is just pushing down on it a little bit. And then we're going to have a very lightly floured counter. And we're going to roll it flat with a rolling pin. Some people do this just by patting it down with their hands, but the rolling pin is a better option.
For uniform thickness, or?
Yes.
Well, the bowl is warm. Did you have it in the oven?
Yes, with the light on.
That's how it rose?
Yeah, you want a nice 80-degree environment for the dough to rise. It could rise at room temperature, but it will take longer.
Well, that doesn't look very much like a loaf of bread right now.
No, we are just getting it a uniform thickness, pretty much a rectangular shape. And then we roll it up like a jelly roll. Now it's getting to look like a loaf of bread.
Now it looks like a jelly roll.
Yeah, well, it's like a loaf shape.
And you're tucking the ends underneath?
Yes, and then you're going to turn it over and kind of pinch it closed so there's no seam. And then what I generally do once I've got it at this stage is I roll it a little bit to make it smooth. And there you have your dough ready to go in the bread pan.
What kind of a bread pan do you have here?
This is a metal 10 by 6 loaf pan. This works very well in a 9 by 5 loaf pan as well. I just happen to like this pan. And I just push it down a little bit.
Can you do this in a glass pan as well?
You can. Glass pans tend to cook a little differently, so you just have to watch it.
It's gorgeous. What happens next?
So we're going to cover this with plastic wrap again, and 30 to 45 minutes. We want it to be up maybe 1/4 of an inch above the lip of the pan, and that means it's ready to go in the oven. All right, our dough has been rising for 45 minutes and is now at the right place. It's a little bit above the lip of the pan, 1/4 to 1/2 inch, maybe almost an inch, which is just about right. It's going to rise a bunch more when it goes in the oven. The heat will give it what they call oven spring. The oven has been preheated to 350 and we're going into the oven for 40 minutes. Okay, time is up. Time to take it out of the oven. And here's our loaf of bread.
Oh my goodness, I wish you could smell this bread. Beautiful, perfect golden texture. Now how long do we need to let that sit here before we can actually taste it?
Oh, it might take a couple hours to fully cool.
A couple of hours?
Yeah, and the rule is you don't slice bread until it's fully cooled, or it shreds.
All right, well, I'm going to stop the camera so I can cry right now. Then we'll come back and slice it open and taste it together.
Hi there.
Okay, are we ready to taste?
Yes.
Go ahead and show us how beautiful this bread looks on the inside. Looks like it has a really nice texture. Wow, it's very rye breadish. Do we want to just taste the crust?
Yeah.
Piece for you, piece for me. It has a really nice soft outside.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say? This is a good sandwich bread,
Very
breakfast
good.
bread?
Good sandwich bread. Good for toasting.
I do taste a little bit of the sour
Mm-hmm.
from the vinegar
Yeah.
and also from the buttermilk, would you say?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Please let us know in the comments if you make this bread While you're at it, would you consider subscribing if you haven't already? Like this video? Go ahead and check out some of our other videos, including the one that we made just to talk about yeast. There are links in the description box. The full recipe is in the description box. And thanks very much for watching.